It's a lot of la-las in that song. I didn't realize there were that many la-la-la-la-las in that Lair song. Hello, Internet. My name is John Kulas. I'm a 20-year professor of industrial and organizational psychology. I'm a 10-year user of R for statistical applications, and for the last 7 or 8 years, I've also been using R to author things like slide decks and papers and technical reports and all kinds of fun stuff. So every week I get together with some of my collaborators on using R to author things, and we just make ourselves available if there's anyone else out there who wants to just bend an ear, get some ideas, or maybe not quite sure where to start, which is what we're going to focus on tonight. And so we just hang out for an hour. The metaphor, analogy, whatever you want to call it, that we use is kind of an academic one of office hours. And so we just stay here for an hour and roughly an hour. And if anyone is interested in trying to figure out how to use R as an authoring platform, um, we're here to help. So uh, every week we also focus on a topic. So we choose some feature that are Markdown, or more commonly recently Quarto, this other authoring platform, a feature that is enabled through one of those platforms, and we kind of just explore it. Last week was our second week looking into an extension called Excalidraw, which is pretty neat. I was really kind of loving the diagram options with Excalidraw, and I'm also finding out that that mermaid diagram capability that we played with a few weeks ago, that is so pervasive. It's available and enabled in all kinds of different platforms. It's not unique to Quarto. It's something that's out there, and it has its own support system. And those mermaid diagrams are just so neat, and they work so well with the Excalidraw extension in terms of customizing them and getting them to look like what you want them to. Today's going to be a little different, so we'll recap what happened with Excalidraw last week. But today, Pasquale, one of the collaborators, co-hosts that comes in occasionally, he had a really good question a couple of weeks ago. I think it was probably before the holidays. But he came in and he said, "Well, where do you even start with this stuff?" And we've been doing this now. What, this is number 61. So we've been doing this over a year, and just always finding a different little feature, another little nook and cranny in this authoring kind of space to explore and check out, and probably maybe lost the forest for the trees a little bit. But it's a really good question, and so tonight what we're going to do is we're going to pull back a little bit, and we're going to just say, well, if someone were to be interested, if someone thought that maybe they had a little bit of interest in doing some of this stuff, building a slide deck like what you see here, what's linked in the comments, how do you go about doing that? And so that's going to be tonight's focus. Is we'll actually, after now we've been working with this, and I think we're going to focus on Quarto, the kind of more up to date, recently supported authoring platform that Posit, the company that provides the IDE that I still prefer to use. Um, the product that they put out, I think we'll cover how to go ahead and get started with that specifically. So that'll be fun. Before we do that, we'll take a look at what happened last week. So let's get our transition boys in here.
Last time, you remember, Bullwinkle inherited a mine from his Uncle Dewlap. Nobody seemed to know what kind of mine it was, but somebody sure wanted to keep our boys away from it. But whoever it was didn't reckon on the determination of our heroes, for with more courage than brains, they started to pack.
Nobody's gonna scare us, eh, Bullwinkle?
No, not you anyways, Rock. Besides, what can happen to us here in our own little home sweet home?
But unbeknownst to Bullwinkle, a can of TNT had been placed inside his suitcase, wired to go off as soon as he opened it. And a little way from the house, a mysterious figure seemed to be waiting for the explosion.
More courage than brains is one of the all-time best insults slash compliments, I think, it doesn't get used enough. Like I might have to, I might have to see if I can resurrect that one a little bit. More courage than brains. There are probably many there. I know people who know me well would say yes, that could be applied to me frequently, but I didn't come up with it. It's a Rocky and Bullwinkle narrator thing. So last week when we were checking out Excalibur, we spent most of the time playing with the mermaid diagrams. And so the syntax for that, I think we kept the syntax in last week's slides for a diagram. I didn't include the syntax this time. It's not the typical scripting structure that we're used to following. It's actually mermaid scripting, which has its own structure, but it's fairly intuitive. The neat thing about crafting a mermaid diagram within the slide extension that we used was that the palette, and you can just do this in Excalibur as well. You don't need to be using Quarto. You don't need to do an R authored presentation. You can actually just go straight to the Excalibur website. There's a website if you just Google Excalibur, and you'll have a palette there. And they also have enabled the mermaid syntax, so you can go ahead and port in your mermaid syntax, create whatever model you're trying to represent. And then the neatest thing is all these elements are linked. So with that mermaid diagram specification, all of these nodes, all of these linkages between nodes have glue to them. So you can, you can click them and drag them, put them wherever you want, and the pieces stay together. So it was something that I wasn't not looking into Excalibur at all. It wasn't something that I anticipated, but it was definitely something that I appreciate. And in the future, I am a psychologist, and I do like to try to still do research. And part of that process is to try to publish, try to get someone to maybe help you with the communication piece of the research, the summary of the research. And these sorts of models are just very common in those applications. And so next time I find myself having the opportunity to represent something visually like this, and a psychologist would refer to these as associations among constructs. The constructs are identified by those ovals. I'm definitely going to be using Excalibur just because of that linkage, that glue element, and how you can pull stuff around, and that was just so neat. So I don't have much here in terms of what we played with the model. I actually didn't salvage. I didn't salvage the script that I used last week, so I just went in and grabbed a different psychological model here that's relevant for me and some of the collaborators that come on here. Our training is in industrial and organizational psychology, so we're interested in things like people's well-being at work, outcomes like how satisfied they are, and then we also talk about predictors, and predictors are things like, well, how much support do you get from coworkers or supervisors? How much autonomy do you have, personal choice and discretion? And so this isn't any groundbreaking model. It was just one that came up and looked like I could represent it. So within Mermaid, I just tried to have a reasonable facsimile of this model, and the default specification of that here is on the clean tab. There's a very easy, quick little light switch option in Excalibur, and that's just inverting the light of things. So what was before light now is dark, and what was dark is now light. And so that's always kind of a neat way to present stuff. And then really the thing that made this stand out from the beginning, before we started a deeper exploration into it, was the kind of hand-drawn nature of it. And so they have, I think their scale is called a sloppiness scale. And so this is maximum sloppy. So maximum sloppability, if that's a word. I know it's not a word, but it sounds fun. So the coloring, I think Diego liked that coloring, the kind of greenish. There was a salmon color that I for whatever reason kind of liked. But you can see kind of some of the slight difference here in terms of I think sloppy is probably a great descriptor. It's just a little more hand drawn ish looking. Even the font changes and the font specifications. There weren't a ton of easy options straight out of the box playing with this extension, but it looks like if you really wanted to, you could get a little more specific with just exactly how much this top playing stuff matches that bottom one, which is a more common representation that someone would make in a Microsoft product, right? So that looks straight out of Word or PowerPoint. It looks to me like a word visual. But I'm off of that train now. So moving forward, I'm all in on Excalibur. I love it. I thought it was pretty neat. I'm glad it was a very fun feature to take a look at because it was something I was not familiar with. I've never heard of Excalibur before a few weeks ago, and now look at me. Now I'm shilling for them. Now I'm saying everyone should use it. So today will be a little bit different. We're not exploring a feature today. We're actually going to and I hope a couple people show up because I'd like to get some different perspectives on this. But I think today we're gonna give some recommendations on if there's an interest in maybe porting over some of your workflows to be fully self-contained within R, is the platform that we've been focusing on, R. How do you even go about doing that? And so the before we talk about how do you go about doing that, I think it's probably, and this is for me as well, I'm putting together a few different resources for a grander project. But one of the things that I've been really trying to think about, and it's been something that I've been kind of not stumbling on, but kind of it's stalled my progress a little bit because I've been really trying to frame why this is so doggone important, and I truly do believe it's very important. I've been focused on workflows such as this, fully self-contained within one authoring platform, for a very long time. It's why I'm so geeked out about it, and why I keep coming back to these Tuesday sessions. I think these capabilities have now kind of caught up with the need, and so it's just so accessible. It's so the barriers to using these principles they've never been lower. Like I mentioned Posit, the company, probably more than I should, and again, I have no association with them. I don't even know anyone personally that works there, but I just their philosophy and their products are very much aligned with what I'm trying to do, and so they're focusing on this scientific communication piece as well, and so it's just a good time to kind of get on the train. And so there's something called the reproducible research standard or practice, and this has become it's become kind of a very popular saying and phrase within research circles within the social and behavioral sciences over the course of the last 7 or 8 years. And so I it's always been something that's part of the scientific process, but this standard that's communicated to people who are trying to publish research, that you should construct your project in such a way that it's fully reproducible, probably came about because of some of the replicability issues within predominantly social psychology. Psychology as a field kind of went through a bit of a rough patch with over the course of the last 7 or 8 years in terms of many well publicized findings not replicating beyond the original what's called seminal study, important original study. And so I think the reproducibility research standard that we started hearing in psychology probably came from some of the grumblings over the reproducibility kind of crisis, as it's called. And so what we're doing, what we're promoting, and what tonight we're saying how to go ahead and start doing is to contain your entire project within one platform. And the easiest way to think about what this looks like is to think about what it doesn't look like. So traditionally, someone like me, a psychologist, would conduct an experiment or a study, and I would have data, and because quantitative methodologies tend to be preferred within my field, I almost always would deal with data. And the data you would treat within a standalone data analytical platform. I don't. I sound like a caveman when I'm describing this. I don't know why, but it sounds. It now sounds like I'm thinking of this as like this old archaic process. Many people still do it. I'm saying don't do it. I'm saying there's no reason to do this moving forward. But so the old process is you would have as a researcher or someone who's involved in the research process, you would have your favored go-to statistical platform. So for many psychologists over the course of very many years, their favored statistical platform was usually SPSS. There's another platform called SAS. There's a platform called Gauss. There's Python is another statistical platform currently. There's so many of them. And when I was going to school, there were um, there were platforms that were very unique and specialized for particular analytical and statistical applications. So I learned all this Roush software. So I learned wind steps and facets. I learned structural equations modeling on Lisrel. Amos is another. There's M plus. There's so many different platforms that permit the investigation of kind of some of these specialized analytical procedures. Um, Diego, when he pops in here, you'll sometimes hear him talking about measurement. He likes psychological measurement. And so we would have to learn other software for specialized psychological measurement investigations that's focused on item response theory. There's a ton of those programs. Multilog, Bilog were two that I used to use with some frequency. So there's a number of different statistical platforms that you can go to try to fit whatever specialized question you're trying to answer. And so, man, I'm not a full-time professor anymore, but I can give a long-winded professorial answer, can't I? So, so the process not just to investigate your question, but to communicate what you found to other people would be, all right, I'm on my computer analytical program here for 4 hours today, but then I'm going to take that information and I'm going to write it up. I'm going to summarize it in a normal word processor. So that was almost universally done in Word, Microsoft Word. And so the problem is you got these two different approaches here. You have these two different work processes. One is dealing with the analysis itself, the quantitative aspects, and the other is framing that and actually summarizing it. Now, that's not the most efficient way to construct a project. So this reproducibility standard, really one of the reasons it's so powerful is it obviates that need for a word processor and an analytical platform. Now I have a one-stop shop, so I can just go to R. I can of course, I'm going to do my analyses in R. And one of the reasons I like R is because I don't need multilog. I don't need Bilog. I don't need Lisrel. I don't need Amos. I don't need facets and wind steps and all these other programs that I had to learn for specialized purposes. R does it all. I can do all that stuff right now in R that I used to sit at my office desk for hours and hours and hours reading manuals trying to figure out how to actually use these specialized pieces of software. So I can use R for any analytical thing that I want to do. For me, R is sufficient. I can also use R to summarize. I can also use R to craft the story I'm trying to tell around the analyses themselves. And that's just so powerful. So the one-stop shop aspect that's conforming to this reproducible research standard is saying, I'm no longer going between at least two different programs to hit two different components of my project. My project is my project, and the data analyses and the summary of the analyses have equal importance, and they're all accomplished within the same program. Not only that, but if someone wants to see what I've done in terms of me being transparent with the process itself and with the project itself, it's all there in a single file. I just give them so for the projects that came about before Quarto, I would share my RMD. So the RMD is a markdown file, and we've been using a package called Papaja to craft APA formatted papers. The entire paper is contained within one Papaja RMD file. It's a script file. It's a script file that has the summary, the literature review, it has the results, it has all the references, it has all the analyses, it grabs all the data, does all the manipulations to the data. Everything is there. So it's fully transparent. If someone wants to go in there and say, I'm not quite sure that I agree with all the choices that you made here, I don't have to reconstruct those choices. I can just say, here are the choices. Yes, it's probably an imperfect project. They all are imperfect. Hopefully the flaws aren't fatal. Here, go at it. Take a look. And so journals, the outlets that academics and applied researchers most commonly solicit to try to share the findings of their projects, they're increasingly wanting and supporting these reproducible research standards, and they have repositories to actually store not just scripts but also the data if you want to do that, and are able to do that. So one of the reasons that you should be interested in learning about how to use R, I'm going to stick with R here, how to use R as a platform not just for the analyses but for your entire project, is to be consistent with this reproducibility research standard or reproducible research standard. I hope it becomes something that fields embrace, and it's not just kind of like a gimmicky right now kind of thing. It almost has a feel that it might be just kind of a gimmicky right now feel kind of thing. The way that I'm guessing it came about with that reproducibility kind of crisis that we saw in psychology. The just sheer efficiency of structuring your work in this way hits me in all kinds of different ways, but one of the very practical ways that the efficiency of authoring within R really hits me is what I'm calling here the dynamic nature of data summaries. And so when you're scripting, when I'm writing my summary, historically, again, if I'm writing this in a word processor, I need to consult the data and look at some of the results of the data and then port that over to the word processor. So for example, I might have a database, and I can scroll through that database in my analytical platform, and I can look for the very bottom of that database, count the number of rows, and then for a psychologist, the number of rows most commonly reflect the number of people that participated in your project. And so I would take note of that, and let's say it's 75. So there's 75 rows down. If I'm not employing the process that I'm advocating here, but if I'm using a word processor as well as an analytical platform, I take that number, put it in my head, or write it down somewhere, maybe on a post-it note, hang it up, and then I go into my word processor, and as I'm summarizing, I have a participants section. I'll write 75 undergraduate students made ratings of item social desirability. Now, that just that it seems funny to me even thinking about doing that. And I used to do it for years and years and years, but I don't do it anymore. And I don't do it anymore because you don't have to, because you can actually, if you're authoring, if you're writing in the same platform as your data analysis, you can just call up the data. And we do that through what are called inline codes. And so the inline code here, it's a tick. So the tick is next to, well, there's different ticks. So the tick you don't want lives in the woods here in Minnesota, and they're not fun. But the tick that is fun is right next to your escape key on your keyboard. Around it somewhere, it's right under the escape key on my keyboard. And so tick and then the letter R says this is an R command that's coming up. An nrow is a built-in R function. It just says give me the number of rows in whatever the object is that I'm going to call out. And the object here, I'm just calling data. So what this is going to do is it's going to present a number. It's going to present a number that reflects the number of rows that are currently in that data object. So now if I collect more data, I don't need to go back to my word processor and amend that number 75. I just rerun my script and it automatically reads in the data because the data is part of this living project itself. So in terms of the data dynamic aspect of this, I love it. I love how your summary of your project is this living, breathing thing that can change as your project changes, as your data changes. And this is just one very obvious way to do it. We also read in things like means and standard deviations. We read in any sort of analysis that you do. You can actually read in directly into your document, and you're not placing values within the document. You're actually asking your document to go and look at the data and to present you those values. The formatting aspect of this as well is another element of efficiency. So every project that we write is going to kind of look like what you see here in the screenshot with lines 11 through 14 here. It's just a very small screenshot of a bit of a paper. The square brackets are talking about a reference that we have, but the formatting of that reference, it can be whatever you want it to be. If we had on a previous week, we talked about the Quarto style repository. And in that, I'm sorry, not Quarto, we talked about Zotero. Zotero keeps a style repository of, let's go ahead and just take a look here. I wonder how many there are. I'm just doing a search for Zotero style repository. I don't know if it says how many there actually are, but there's a lot. There's a ton of them. And so these are all different ways to format references within a paper. A lot of these are specific for a field. Some of them are specific for particular journals. Some of these journals as well, it's not as common in psychology as some of the harder sciences. But some journals have their own just template format that you can take and apply to a document like this, because this process of constructing a paper has been something that other fields have been doing for years and years and years, at least since the 1980s. So computer scientists, physicists do this, statisticians do this as well. They're all constructing the paper using these principles that we're talking about. I'm trying to be kind of careful with my terminology here. But the formatting is something that takes place above and beyond the actual substance of your document. The substance of your document doesn't need to change in order to conform to this outlet or that outlet. It's a very simple, sometimes just a one-word command that changes the formatting. Sometimes it's the introduction of a file, like a citation style file that we might get from Zotero. Sometimes it's a template. It's a LaTeX template that LaTeX, one of those words I was trying to avoid using, but it's a formatting template that maybe a journal keeps. universities have these templates as well for things like dissertations and theses. So you don't need to worry about that. Um, I, Again, back in the day, that was one of the things I did not mind doing on a paper would be just messing with tables. So in Word, for example, you can kind of click and drag around to get the columns where you want. You don't do any of that. You don't need to do any of that if you choose to structure your work such that you're authoring all within R here. The formatting is something that takes place above and beyond the content of what you're writing. And then the biggest thing for me is really how error is dealt with. And so error arises from all kinds of different sources, but there is a very obvious potential source of error if you're just dealing with two different programs. If you have one program that's focused on summarizing, writing, and another program that's based on the data analyses themselves, there is potential just in the back and forth between those two programs of a miscommunication, of a cut and paste that didn't go where you wanted it to. Man, I can't even tell you how many students that were adamant with me that they don't that they don't make mistakes. Well, I'm really good at this. Other people might make mistakes, but I don't. Everybody's going to make a mistake using. You're going to make a mistake authoring this way as well. The issue with making mistakes authoring in this manner, where everything is self-contained and together, is they're easier to find and they're easier to reconstruct. They're just there. They're documented, I think, is the other kind of element that I have here for why dealing with error is something that is elevated if you structure your work such that your summary and your quantitative analyses themselves are all crafted within the same process, within the same document. Okay, so I spent more time on that than I wanted to. But actually, if someone comes across this, the larger project is a teaching guide, maybe something that might eventually turn into a book, but a teaching guide on pulling these principles together and really trying to give people a resource that can be used so that they can do this in their day-to-day work. And so I need a better way to frame this. I know all the elements that I think are important, but I think just in terms of the framing, the words that are used and terminology and things like that, I need some help with that, I think. So if anyone comes across this and you have some ideas for better ways to frame this, drop me a note, please. I would love to see that. I would like the help. Okay, and then in terms of the things that you can produce, this is a non-exhaustive list. There are so many different things that you can do entirely within R. And so one that is important to me is a technical report, which is simply the documentation of the production of something. For me, that's what it is. So a technical report is like a scientific communication, but it's probably not going to be a scientific communication that is widely published. It might be only available to a few limited eyes, but it's important nonetheless. Documents how, for example, if I create a new psychological assessment, I'll have a technical report that documents the steps taken, how we looked at it, how we made an evaluation as to whether this thing might be useful or maybe it has some issues with it. So technical reports, you can certainly write. Dashboards are really, really popular. You can fully author these dashboards using these processes and tools that we're talking about. The thing that I've really been geeked up on over the course of the last year or so are these presentations. I can't imagine ever going back to PowerPoint. What you're looking at is one of the presentations. It's a Reveal.js presentation, and that's the type of presentation format that I've been focused on. You don't have to be focused on that. You can create PowerPoint slides using fully within R. You can do that. I just like these Reveal.js slides. This HTML authoring stuff is kind of new to me. So I'm really enjoying the flexibility of creating something that can be displayed in a browser and makes it easy to share with people. And all the functionality there is going to be, not just mine, but it's shared with other people too who access this. So I love these presentations. The I have students who have written their dissertations using this, entirely self-contained. As I mentioned earlier, many universities will have a template that you can simply apply to your dissertation if you author it within, let's say, R. There's a template that will take care of all the formatting for you, so you don't have to worry about that. Theses, dissertations are in other disciplines. Those have been for years being authored using a process very similar to what we're talking about tonight. Feedback reports. So feedback reports and technical reports I consider to be two different creatures. So a technical report is almost like a scientific article. It documents steps that you took. A feedback report is something that's going to be reviewed and evaluated by someone without technical experience and knowledge and skill. So some end user that doesn't know anything about the process you used to create this report is going to be looking at the report, reviewing the report, maybe using the report. And so feedback reports are something that I focus on as well. So giving summarized results of assessment and survey data is usually done with a feedback report. And so those you can do in this process as well. It's one of the big projects I'm working on over the course of the last few months is focused on feedback of a survey. You can, what the heck would I mean by this? Oh, websites. Sorry, that icon isn't, it's not as descriptive as probably should be. But you can do websites as well. My personal company website is fully authored within R using, I think we focused a week or two on how to do websites using this process. So I think there's a snipped video on this channel about that. But websites are really no different than books. It's kind of the same process. You can do diagrams, as we've been focusing on diagrams the last few weeks. You can do conference posters. So when I'm presenting research at an academic conference, the last 5 or 6 years, 6 or 7 years, we've been fully creating those within R. And that's been fun too, because as we go to these conferences, you can, if you walk around and look at posters, which are a traditional way to present research at these conferences, one traditional way to present research, it's fun seeing other people who have obviously used the same or a very similar process to create their posters. So there's a couple of packages that are popular, and so you get a sense of the theming and what those kind of look like. So I remember when I first started seeing them, I would pop by and say, "Hey, you used Poster Down." It's a package that facilitates the creation of these conference posters, and no one was excited as I was. So I think I did it twice, and the reaction was, "Who's this weirdo?" And yeah, of course I used it, but I was really excited. So you can do academic posters. You can do anything you want to summarize a project as. You can go ahead and do that using these principles, using R as an authoring platform. Now, the way that it's actually done, is a kind of a combination of two different tools. And so one tool you're probably familiar with, and that's just simply the analytical capabilities of R. And so this is how most people think about R, is I'm going to go in there and I'm going to do some analyses. This analysis, I have it annotated. I'm just getting data, and then I'm running some diagnostics that someone interested in psychological assessment tends to look at. And then I'm also creating from the component answers, I'm creating some summary scores, which we oftentimes do. And we call those scale scores. And so these are data manipulations that would always be done fully within R, um, and they're still being done within R. The only difference is that I'm also using R to craft a story, and the story is usually done through a, a writing. What would you even call it? So it's usually done through a writing process that involves Markdown. Now, what Markdown is uh, Markdown and LaTeX or Tech are similar tools. They're languages, but you can think of them as tools to focus on the formatting of the content of what you're focused on. So the idea, the kind of the philosophy behind both of these is the substance of what you're writing should be your focus. Don't worry so much about how it looks. We have some we have some tools, we have some ways to actually play with the way that things look, that affect how things look. And so what you see here on the left, this is just an online free Markdown editor, and it's called StackEdit. What you see on the right is a preview of what the content looks like if we write it in Markdown. Now, Markdown looks very similar to just standard writing until we get to format issues. And so, for example, you see two asterisks here around StackEdit. Now, those two asterisks, I'm bleeding through a little bit here in terms of content preview. This is not an editor that I use. I just kind of found it. But I'm actually seeing some preview on the left of how the Markdown is going to render on the right, which is not ideal for my purpose here of actually showing this. But these commands, these little alterations that you can actually have to text make big differences in terms of the rendering of it. So there's bullets that you can add, and you can see on the right it's actually being indented a little bit. There's some internal logic to the bullets themselves. Usually a plus mark is a non-numbered bullet, and there's some in this editor. There's some logic that's being followed, so it's doing some autocompletes for me as well. There are ways to do things like indented block quotes. So it's usually just a caret sign, and I can say note here. Now you see on the right, you're getting a little vertical line there and a little shadowing of a graying of the text itself. And so these are the types of format. The single hashtag is a first level header. Two hashtags are second level headers. And these become important because if you have a different style that you want to render to, for example, if you want to follow the recommendations of the American Psychological Association, or MLA as another style guide, you can apply that style guide to the writing that you have here with, for example, the first and second level headers, and the style will be rendered consistent with APA or MLA without you changing the substance of what you've written at all. So the kind of meta processes of interpreting what you've written take place through the lens of a style guide, and these can be rendered however you want them to be rendered. You see here the way in which URLs or hyperlinks are facilitated. So square brackets and open and end parentheses. Here you see another listing of the bulleting options. Here's the little note content that I described earlier. So what you're looking at is a Markdown editor. And a Markdown editor is simply saying, don't worry so much about format. We're going to take care of format when we render the document. What I want you to focus on is the substance of what you're doing. Because at some point in the future, if you say, well, I want the format to be a little different, but the content stays the same, we can do that really quite easily. And so what we have with R and the capabilities with R is we actually have kind of a combination of this summary of information using Markdown and the capabilities of doing a data analysis with the standard R component. And so Posit, the company that provides RStudio and Positron and other products, they actually had for years, they had their own version of Markdown called R Markdown. And what R Markdown did was it shared a lot of the conventions in terms of asterisks and bullets and notes and things like that. First level headers, second level headers. The way in which you write using R Markdown is very similar to the way in which you write using the Markdown editor that we just saw. That's kind of a universal conventions for these different types of things within documents. So R Markdown really, what it did was it combined Markdown, a Markdown editor, with the capability to do analyses as well. And so what we have today is we actually have a couple of different options. We have the old R Markdown ecosystem, but we also have this new platform that they're supporting called Quarto. And Quarto and R Markdown both, if I'm using either one of those options, they're both going to be able to create websites and presentations and articles and tech reports and feedback reports. All that stuff we talked about before, you can use either platform, R Markdown or Quarto, and they both share this. They both share very similar syntactic structure with regard to the Markdown code itself. Now, Quarto has kind of more options built into it, and it seems to have a lot more support from the broader community in terms of adding capabilities to it. And so in terms of how do I get started using R as an authoring platform, I think what we're going to do tonight, and man, I ran long on this. Sorry, that was supposed to be a 10-minute little overview. But I think what we'll do tonight is we'll see how to load up your computer to get ready to do this using Quarto. And so there's two routes you can go. You can go the R Markdown route, or you can go the Quarto route. Now that we've been fully using Quarto for the last year or so, I think I would also recommend using Quarto. And so in terms of what you're doing, there's I would recommend two different routes to get started. One, and this is the route that I took, and I'm still taking, I guess, is you have a current project. So ideally that project has some data component to it. And you have some goal in mind for what the final version of that product is going to look like. Is it going to look like an academic paper? Is it going to look like a conference presentation? Is it going to look like a technical report, a feedback report, a website, a book? What is it that you want to turn this thing into? And so for me as a professor, the projects that I got started on with this were all academic papers. So these were all research projects that I was trying to consolidate into a paper and pass that paper on to a journal for hopefully maybe for possibly publishing it. I've had such a bad dry run of publishing that I kind of feel embarrassed to even say that is something that I aspire to. I guess I still kind of aspire to it, but I've had a lot of the gumption has been kicked out of me, I think, at this point. But so that's how I started, was with academic projects and trying to write an academic paper. And that's why I was using that package called Papaja. Now, we had the author of an extension, a Quarto extension on as well. That extension is called APA Quarto, and that does the same formatting that Papaja did, but it's intended to be used in Quarto, this newer platform. And so you can take a current project, if you have a current project that you're working on and want to see if you can roll in some of these concepts and just fully present it within R. Divorce yourself from PowerPoint, divorce yourself from Microsoft Word. Or if you don't want to take a current project, my recommendation would be, because there's so many neat little tweaks and customizations and alterations that you can apply fairly simply. my recommendation would be to use one of these comfy Reveal.js presentations. Now that's what you're looking at here. So I think tonight what we'll do is we'll get Quarto installed, and then we'll take a look at how to create a Reveal.js presentation with some data in it. So we'll actually have some dynamic elements to it in terms of reading in the data, maybe presenting that reading into the data within the file itself. Okay, so let's go to R Studio, and I'm gonna exit out of project folder. This is the project folder that I use for the live stream slides, and I'm just gonna have an empty R Studio session open. Now, Quarto, when we first started using it, there was a little bit of a confusion because there is a package called Quarto, and you can go ahead and install that. So if I do installation Quarto, it's on CRAN, so it should come up in your installation window. And this doesn't have the full capability and functionality of Quarto itself. This is just going to do things like it will create some shortcut options on my toolbars. So where I have this run option now, I'll have a knit or a render button. There's another way to work with Quarto, which is at the terminal. And so I can type in Quarto commands at the terminal. I can ask Quarto to render directly from the terminal. But adding this package will give us some buttons. And I think my recommendation, if you're just getting started with this, is to definitely get the Quarto package, and we'll see what those buttons actually look like. And then I'm gonna see if I can do just a search for Quarto installation. You need the software to be installed outside of R as well. So you need R, and then most people use an IDE, either VS Code or RStudio or Positron. I still like RStudio, so that's what I'm using. I'm going to install this. It's actually it looks like it has a fairly recent update. We've been trying to stay on top of these updates when they come out, but I think I missed a couple. Last one I remember, I remember very distinctly was 1.4, because the package unfortunately is kind of trending in the same version number, and so it was a source of confusion for us when we first started playing with Quarto. But I'll go ahead and do that installation. So make sure you have R, make sure you have an IDE like RStudio, download the Quarto package, and then look for the Quarto installation separate from R. So this is entirely something that happens independent from R itself. It's a separate piece of software that you want to install on your computer. I have a lot of profiles on this computer. I'm gonna make it available just to me. We'll go through a couple of these, and I'm tempted to abort this because, well, we'll see. So I have a lot of the profile threw me off. I have a lot of I have linkages to a lot of posits, very user-friendly options to help to promote the use of this. So I'm just curious to see if maybe I'm going to screw up some of my linkages that I have to some of this product. I doubt it, actually, but it could actually happen, I suppose. So we wait for the wizard. Let's see if we got any waiting drops here. Oh. Okay. So easy installation. You don't need to put it anywhere specific. You don't need to have a working directory that's linked to it. It just needs to be on your computer. RStudio, if you're in RStudio, will actually find it. If we want to create a Reveal.js presentation, now you might need to restart your RStudio. So let me go ahead and do that. Doesn't want to die here. It's like a AI. It says, no, don't kill me. Don't go away. I don't want to go away. It's been really cold here, so we're getting a respite tomorrow. I actually, it's so cold that my power went off for a little bit. I had to have something to do with the temperature. I'm guessing. All right, so I restarted my RStudio. I'm gonna look for a new file, and I should have some options here. Again, if you're operating from the perspective of this is a quantitative analytical platform, you may be used to working with scripts. So that's the first option here. You see R Markdown and Quarto, and so we're gonna open a Quarto presentation. This wizard is going to walk you through some fairly standard options. There are kind of three main presentation types that you can author out of the box with Quarto. The Reveal.js is the one that I've been using, and it's the default one. The Beamer presentations are going to give you a PDF version of slides, and then PowerPoint is going to give you those PPTX versions of slides. The Reveal, to me, is the most flexible, and again, these HTML output files, I'm really liking those, so we're going to stick with that. You don't really need to give it a author or title if you don't want, because those are going to appear in your YAML up here. And so if you wanted to change it, we could change it. We can just say trying out or getting started. Now, especially if you've just installed Quarto and you've just installed the Quarto package, you're probably going to want to, without much tweaking, just test your file here. And when you hear me say QMDs, this is going to be saved as a QMD type of file. That's the 3-letter extension on the file itself. It's not saved anywhere yet. It doesn't have a QMD associated with it. But as soon as and again, this render button that you see here is something that pops up if we've installed the Quarto package within R itself. I'm going to go ahead and use that. Now it's going to prompt me, say, well, okay, we're going to save it as a QMD, but you should probably give it a name. And we'll call it Spot, because Spot's a nice name. Now, Spot's going to go ahead and render. There's not a ton of content in here. If I pop that out, I can navigate it with the keypad. And you see 1, 2, 3, was it 4 slides, including the title, Getting Started Quarto Bullets and Code. Now, if we wanted to start to play with this, you see some markdown here. So you see these 2 hashtags are a second level header. In the context of presentations for Quarto, those hashtags are defining a new slide. So if you want to see what happens if you did a first level header, you could put that in. So at the very bottom here, we have a code. We can actually say what happens here. Go ahead and re-render that. And these 3 horizontal bars on the bottom are showing that it doesn't look like a whole lot happened. There's some little subtle differences here. Now with the default slide deck, with a first level specification, I'm seeing this centering here. And the font is a little bigger. With the 2 headings, the 2 hashtag headings, I'm seeing left justified and higher on the page here for the actual title of the slides. So that's a difference, and that's something, again, that you can always override all this stuff. But it's one difference that I'm seeing there with my first level versus second level headers. Now, the thing that I think we probably want to spend a little more time on is the analytical aspect of this. So let's see if we can get a pretty picture in here. Look for a Plotly object and see if we can just grab some default data and present it. And again, one of the nice things about these Reveal.js slides is that HTML aspect. So the interactivity is going to actually be supported. And Plotly is a fun package that does actually have interactive capabilities. We'll see if this works. I guess it's not pulling data from an existing package like Iris or Palmer Penguins. It looks like it's somewhere online, but we'll actually see if it works here. There's a code chunk. So the way that in these Quarto or R Markdown files, the way that you interact with R, the quantitative processor, is to use what are called chunks. These chunks are identified by these 3 ticks. This is an R chunk. You can have a Python chunk. You can have a Mermaid chunk if you want to do a picture. Maybe we'll do a picture for slide 2 before we call it a night. But I'm loading in the Plotly object and I'm asking for my figure to be rendered. So let's see what that does. So there it is. What else do we want to say about that? There are some options that we could play with in terms of where this is rendered. Underneath the paragraph or in columns, I can actually have one column reflect the code itself, and the next column, the adjacent column, reflect the content that's actually being rendered. If you wanted to share this with someone, they can take this and they'll get the same level of feedback that we're actually getting here. There are different themes that can be applied as well. So in these in this front matter bit, the YAML specifications, this is where the meta formatting decisions are made. So these are global changes that you want to impact the entire document that you're creating. And so if you want to get specific with how things look within this YAML, we're going to have to pay attention to indenting. So what I just did there was I took the Reveal.js specification at the end of format, did a hard return and an indent, so it's one level over. And now I'm going to do the same thing under Reveal.js and give it some additional commands. And I think one thing we can take a look at is maybe just themes. And then again, you would just kind of build your slide deck to be consistent with something that you like. Just one slide at a time. You just put content in there. Solarized, I don't know what that is. Let's see if this works. And so it should apply that theme to every slide in my slide deck, and it looks like it's kind of a beached out kind of look. You can see the font changed and the background's changed. Let's put a picture in here, I guess. We can put pictures are fairly straightforward in Markdown and Quarto. So I really don't like the new Snoopy look. This is a newer Snoopy. I like the 50s, 1950s Snoopy. When he had teeth, do you anyone remember that? He actually used to have teeth. Man, I love old Snoopy. Well, that's really old. I don't know about that so much. It is cute though. Yeah, we'll see if we can put Snoopy on there. So I'm going to copy that image address and we'll just put them on. We'll put them on this page here, Quarto. And so it's a exclamation point, square brackets, and then in parentheses you put the image that you're interested in. And there's all kinds of modification and tweaking of that we can do. Did Snoopy not show up? Oh, there he is. So we can take them, and one of the things that I've been playing with that has been fun is CSS. So CSS is different stylings that can be applied. I'm not sure why he's not showing up on my preview, but he does show up when we look at the full slide deck. So HTML, that's one of the responsiveness of the size of the file. That's something that you got to get kind of used to with HTML files. So the what you're looking at can look quite different depending on where it's actually being published. Okay, so I guess probably don't need to do a lot more than that. I just wanted to kind of give some recommendations if people are interested in getting started with this and where to start. So again, if you have an existing project, that's great. If you don't, most people have need for some type of presentation. So whatever it is that you're giving your next presentation on, think about doing it in R. Even if there's no data that you need to present, see if you can do it in R. Doing it in R, that'll give you one step up toward building all of these processes into projects where you do have data or you are in need of incorporating data into the story itself. So, okay, I think we'll just drop it there. If there's any further questions on how to get more elaborate with this, maybe next week, maybe what we'll do is we'll just take a look at Reveal.js itself and see what kinds of neat additions you can add that really kind of spice it up. So I think just off the top of my head, that's maybe something that would be a good transition from this week into next, is now that we're all set up and ready to create a Reveal.js presentation slide deck, how do we spice it up? Yeah, let's do that. I like that idea. All right, see you next week. Stay warm, everybody.